Quantum echo. In quantum mechanics, any particle exists simultaneously in multiple states until observation occurs. But what if we could not just observe, but influence these states retrospectively? This question from Professor Richards during his quantum physics lecture defined my entire life. Back then, 12 years ago, I was just a talented student, and he was a genius whose theories were ahead of their time. None of us imagined that this would become not just a theory, but a reality capable of changing the very concept of fate. The headquarters of Chronosphere towered over Boston like a monument to one man's ambitions. 45 floors of glass and titanium, crowned with a dome where the laboratories were located. It was there, in this sanctuary of technology, that something unthinkable was happening. We were changing the past. Michael, we've done it. Professor Richards' voice, now the head of America's largest technology corporation, sounded restrained, but I knew him well enough to catch the notes of triumph. We've achieved stable quantum coherence at the macro level. The device is ready. I stared at the small cylinder of translucent material on the table. Inside, a bluish glow pulsated, responding to the slightest changes in the gravitational field. How exactly does it work? I asked, unable to tear my gaze from the device. The technology is based on quantum entanglement. The device creates a special field around the user, protecting their consciousness from changes in the fabric of time. When we send a message to the past, reality actually changes for everyone except us. We retain memories of two timelines, the original and the altered one. And how far back can you send a message? Maximum 10 years. Beyond that, quantum entanglement becomes unstable. Richards placed his hand on my shoulder. And for now, only text messages. Photos or videos would require much more power. And who will have access to the technology? Richards smiled, his signature half-smile, the same one I saw whenever he was about to announce something that would change the rules of the game. For now, just you and me, Michael, and the Secretary of Defense, of course. Whoever funds gets to dance. The first time we used Echo, as we called the device between ourselves, was for a simple experiment. Richard sent a message to himself from 2 weeks ago with a warning about possible malfunctions in laboratory equipment. The moment when reality changed felt like an instantaneous dizzying disorientation. Suddenly, I remembered 2 different sets of events. In the original version, the malfunction led to an explosion and a week-long project delay. In the new one, a technician discovered the problem in advance, and work continued without interruption. Richards, who was in the same quantum field as I was, also remembered both versions. "Incredible," he whispered. "I remember reading that message 2 weeks ago, but simultaneously, I remember never receiving it." The second experiment was more ambitious. Richards sent himself a message about a major deal that Chronosphere had missed a month ago. Reality shifted again, and now we had 2 sets of memories. In one, the company lost millions. In the other, it secured a profitable contract. For the whole world outside the quantum field of Echo, there was only one reality, the one where Chronosphere successfully closed the deal. No one except us remembered the original timeline. Do you understand the revolutionary nature of the technology, Michael? Richard said as we discussed the results. We're not just sending messages to the past, we're effectively rewriting history, but only we within the device's field retain memories of both versions of events. I nodded slowly, grasping the implications. So for everyone else, there has always been only one reality. Exactly, and that's our advantage. We remember both versions, can learn from mistakes we technically never made. This concept was too complex to fully comprehend at the time, but I understood one thing. We were playing with the very structure of reality, and the consequences were unpredictable. Over the next 2 years, Chronosphere became not just a technology company, it transformed into an empire. Richards made deals with unerring intuition, predicted market trends, and always stayed one step ahead of competitors. Only I knew his secret. Every morning he locked himself in his office with Echo and adjusted the past, prevented wrong decisions, changed investment strategies, circumvented partners' betrayals. The technology was used in the strictest secrecy. My status changed too. From a simple student, I became the chief assistant, Richard's right hand. At 33, I controlled financial flows equivalent to the budget of a small country, all thanks to a man who believed in me more than I did myself. One evening, Richards invited me to his country estate. This wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, hidden in the woods of New Hampshire, with a security system that a presidential palace would envy. "I have news, Michael," he said as we sat by the fireplace in his study. Outside, snow was falling, creating the illusion of isolation from the entire world. "I've been offered the position of Secretary of Technology." I raised an eyebrow in surprise. Richards had never shown interest in politics. "Will you accept?" "I already have." He sipped his whiskey. "This is just the beginning. In 3 years, the vice president's chair and beyond." He didn't finish the phrase, but I didn't need an explanation. "And the company? It remains with you, Michael. You're ready." I felt my heart beating faster. It had always been clear that I was the heir to the empire, but to hear it directly. "An echo?" I quietly asked. He smiled, but this time there was something in his smile I hadn't seen before. Something cold. "The technology will remain under my control, but you'll have access to it. You've earned it." The first time I used Echo independently was a week after our conversation. I sent a message to myself from 3 months ago with a warning about a failed investment in a network of medical clinics. Reality changed instantly. Now I had 2 sets of memories. In one, I lost millions on this investment. In the other, I directed funds to a more promising project. The feeling of power over time itself was intoxicating. I began to use the device regularly, first for business, then for personal decisions. I warned myself about meetings with people who later proved toxic, about unsuccessful dates, about minor mistakes in projects. Meanwhile, Richards was rapidly climbing the political ladder. His appointment as secretary caused a wave of discussions in the press, a major businessman going into government. But no one suspected his true motives and capabilities. I began to notice oddities about 6 months into using Echo. Each time I changed the past, not only did a new version of events appear in my memories, but strange images of how these changes affected other people's lives. For instance, when I prevented my participation in an unsuccessful project, I suddenly saw how another manager took charge of it, and how his career was destroyed by the very failure that should have happened to me. When I canceled a meeting with a woman whose relationship would have led to a painful breakup, I saw how instead of me she met another man, and how he committed suicide after their separation. At first, I attributed these visions to an overactive imagination, but they became clearer and more distinct with each use of Echo. "It's just stress," I told myself. "Too much work and responsibility." But the images became more intense, and the feeling of others suffering stronger. The breakthrough came on the day Richards was appointed vice president. He invited me to a closed reception at the White House, an honor bestowed on few. After the official part, we secluded ourselves in one of the offices. "This is just the beginning, Michael," he said, intoxicated not so much by champagne as by success. "In a year, the president's office. I've already sent a message to the past with an action plan." I nodded, but my thoughts were far away. The previous night I had the most terrifying vision of all. I saw thousands of lives ruined as a result of our reality manipulations. Something wrong. Richards always sensed my moods. "Professor, do you ever see how our changes affect other people? Not just new memories, but consequences for those who find themselves at the epicenter of changes." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "When we change the past, pain and failure don't disappear. They just redistribute, transfer to other people. I see it every time I use Echo." Richards looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "It's a side effect of prolonged exposure to the quantum field. Hallucinations, nothing more." "Have you never seen anything like this?" Something flashed in his eyes, recognition, fear, but quickly disappeared. "No, and I advise you to think less about such things. We're changing the world for the better, Michael. Everything else is philosophy for the weak." After that conversation, I began my investigation. I installed additional security in my office and an independent server not connected to the chronosphere network. I started documenting each use of echo and subsequent visions. Gradually, a frightening picture emerged. When I canceled a failure in my life, that failure didn't disappear. It crashed down on someone else, often in an amplified form. It was like the law of conservation of energy, only applied to suffering. When I prevented my car accident, I saw how instead of me another driver had an accident, and not just got injured, but died along with passengers. When I changed an investment decision, saving millions, I saw how my colleague who took on this project instead of me didn't just lose money but was accused of embezzlement and committed suicide in prison. The answer came unexpectedly. In one of Richard's old articles, published before Echo was created, I found a hypothesis about quantum echo, a theoretical phenomenon in which negative events prevented through quantum manipulation don't disappear but are amplified and redirected to other people. The universe strives for balance, Richards wrote. If the law of conservation of energy is true for physical systems, it's quite possible that there is a similar law of conservation of probabilistic events and their consequences. What if eliminating a negative event at one point in space-time only increases the probability of its occurrence at another? I went cold. These weren't just visions or hallucinations. This was reality, the horrifying price for our interference with the time flow. It took me a week to gather all the evidence. Echo didn't just change the past, it redistributed negative events. Each time we improved our fate, someone else paid a multiplied price for it. The universe's balance was maintained, but the cost was monstrous. And the more I thought about it, the clearer I understood. Richards knew. He always knew about the quantum echo and the price others paid for our success, but he considered it an acceptable sacrifice. I decided to test my theory conclusively. I sent a message from 2 months ago, warning myself of a minor financial loss. The vision came instantly. I saw how my mother, who in reality was alive and well, died of a heart attack on the very day I should have lost money. The system didn't just redistribute misfortunes, it amplified them and directed them at the most vulnerable point. The plan matured quickly. I couldn't just destroy the technology. Richards would create a new one. I couldn't expose him. No one would believe it, and the evidence was insufficient. I needed to use Echo one last time, but in a way that would stop the entire project at its very inception. In the evening, when almost no one was left in the chronosphere building, I activated the device. I sent a message 10 years back, the maximum possible interval. To Professor Richards, the quantum tunneling effect you're researching has catastrophic consequences. Each reality change creates a quantum echo, redistribution and intensification of suffering for innocent people. Millions of lives will become a nightmare if you continue. Please destroy your research. We must not play with the very structure of reality. The moment when reality began to change was unlike anything I had experienced before. The usual disorientation turned into agony as thousands of versions of events flashed before my eyes. Lives saved and destroyed, decisions made and canceled, entire worlds created and erased by our manipulations. And suddenly I realized, a change of this magnitude, affecting the very foundation of our technological empire, must create a quantum echo of incredible force. Someone has to pay for this change, and that someone could be me. The last thing I saw before reality finally restructured was the echo screen with a message appearing from nowhere. To Michael, your attempt to fix everything will create a quantum storm of unprecedented force. The system's retribution will fall on you. But it's the right choice. It's the only choice. The message was signed with my name. They say something strange happened that night on the 45th floor of Chronosphere. Security saw a flash of blue light, and then the security system recorded an instantaneous shutdown of all cameras and sensors. When employees returned in the morning, my office was empty. All data about Project Echo had been erased from the company's servers, and the device itself had disappeared. Richards ordered all quantum physics research to be stopped and unexpectedly left politics a month later. He never commented on my disappearance and never mentioned Project Echo again. In the new reality I created, the technology for sending messages to the past remained a theoretical concept. Chronosphere became an ordinary technology company, successful but not all-powerful. Richards never received the absolute power he sought. And me? I think I exist on the border of realities, in quantum uncertainty, forever stuck between countless versions of events that we created and destroyed. Perhaps this is the real quantum echo, the price that must be paid by someone who dared to change the course of time and then renounced this power. I was right. When we change the past, someone must pay the price. And it's fair that ultimately that person was me, even if it seems you're always right, even if you think you're ready to pay any price, even if you're changing the world for the better. Because in the quantum echo of suffering, no one hears the cries of those who pay for others' success, except those at the epicenter of changes, except those who remember both versions of reality, except me.